The Nuggets fired Michael Malone earlier this week, if you guys had not heard. What do you think is the biggest reason why he is no longer the coach of the Denver Nuggets?
For me, it's that he lost the locker room. And I think once you do that, you've lost the job. And I think there's maybe a different conversation to be had about how much of it is fault, right, that he lost the locker room. But that doesn't really matter anymore. Once it's done, it's done. And from that standpoint, I really do understand ownership coming in and saying this probably isn't going to get better unless we make it better.
I'm going to go even further and say I don't think the reason he lost the locker room, to whatever extent he actually did, has anything to do with the exterior things, who was on the roster, these different things. I think Michael Malone is a very intense coach, who it was a very good one. And over time, I think that his voice expired, but also when his voice expires, I think there's an intensity to him that probably graded people wrong. And I think that there were players, coaches, people inside the executive team, and even ownership that I think looked at it and said, okay, the time has expired here because this is starting to be grading.
Well, and that naturally happens when you're the coach of a team for 10 years. He was the third longest tenured coach in the league.
Yep.
That's wild. And I mean, he was coaching a bunch of these guys for longer than a lot of coaches coach a core. If you just think about Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter, Aaron Gordon. Yeah. I mean, those guys have been here for almost 5 years, that whole group together. That's pretty rare. I think it's natural that that voice fades. And I think particularly on the defensive end, yes, they lost KCP. There's still no reason they should have slipped as much as they did defensively this season with the personnel they have. So I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Well, and to your point, 10 years. If you told any coach that you hired, you're going to get a championship and be here for 10 years, they'd be, is that success? Most coaches would say, absolutely, that's success.
Of course.
It does not happen 10 years very often. So part of this, it sounds like, oh, he was bad, he was this or that. It might have just run its course. And the weaknesses to his coach, I mean, he has strengths, he has weaknesses. And the weaknesses of his coaching style, personality, and all those things might have overcome, just over time, naturally overcome his strengths in a way that the team needed fresh perspective.
I couldn't agree more. And I think even he knew this, and it was acknowledged in a fiery post-game rant after losing to Portland in late March, in which he said, nobody watches film. And he says the ones who are locked in will agree with me. The ones who aren't will say coach is tripping. And that was as much a plead to his players as it was an admission to us about what I think was clear as day to everyone inside and outside of the organization. They had stopped listening. He's right. They needed to box out, transition defense, turnovers. He identified all the issues. He knew what they were, but he couldn't get the message across. Yeah.
I'll go a step further and even say that I think this is something that the team was going to sound funny, was perhaps even waiting for the right moment. And it's funny because it was the right moment 3 games before the playoffs. Well, it was the only moment there was a 4-game losing streak. There was the only opportunity where I think the door was open. So again, this sounds like piling on a guy when he's out, on his way out the door. But I do think there was something to most people that I have talked to today, if not nearly all, from all corners of the organization, seem to feel that this was an inevitability, whether right or wrong, whatever, that this was inevitable. Right. And so that it happened now and under these circumstances and a season feels like it's on the threshold of being wasted, obviously adds to, you can question the decision-making. But I think most people inside the building are like, yeah, we saw this coming.
And I think you've also got to look at some of, his coaching negatives in terms of the bench. There's a lot of teams out there that are able to construct a bench and a bench offense with way worse talent than the Nuggets have that can at least go even in their minutes. And it's just wild how over the last, 3-4 years, they've never been able to do that consistently. Yeah, they've had injuries. Every team has injuries. Yeah, they have young players. A lot of teams out there have young players. But just the fact that they were never able to tread water consistently with Nikola Jokic off the court, I've got to think that is something that a lot of people in the organization remain frustrated about over the last couple of years.
I think there's even trends you can look at. Okay, so the bench was consistently not good. The defense was always an issue. There were years it was better than others, but it was never like, oh, that wasn't, performing swimmingly. Yeah. Winning streaks never happening. I mean, we joke about this, that there's never been more than a 9-game
we had a 9-game
streak.
winning streak this year.
But 9, right? I mean,
against the worst teams in the league.
The Brooklyn Nets had a 9-game winning streak.
That is true.
It's like there's these things in there that you look at and say, okay, was there something to just the general vibe and stuff? And again, anytime we do a show like this or a segment segment like this, it feels like we're saying, oh, he was bad, and I just don't believe that. I think he was a great coach.
He was
who
a great
ran
coach.
his course, and over time, and that there was just a moment that they had to part ways, and it might have actually been a little bit ago, but the door opened up here on this 4-game losing streak.
What he could do in lieu of some of the deficiencies that you were just describing, Harrison, was reach his players, rally the troops, manage the egos. And once that fell through,
Correct.
you start looking at Malone's place very differently, I think. Worth noting, of course, that this move came alongside another move. Both folks in leadership position here, Calvin Booth, of course, are out. So I don't even think this is the organization saying it's all one person.
Correct.
But Michael Malone is the winningest head coach in team history, the only one to raise the Larry O'Brien, and he's not the coach today. And that's worth discussion. It's worth explanation.
No question. And I will say this, the other part of this, so I think that's the number one part, just, coaches expire. Larry Bird knew this when he was a coach. That's why he stepped down. Is he's like, no, I'm expiring. You guys, he's like, you're doing a great job. Yeah, no, that's the end. I'm done with it.
I think Malone knew too, man.
And I honestly think there's some of that as well. But what I will say is I do think his conflict with Calvin Booth was a big part of this. And wherever you put that blame, 50-50, 60-40, 90-10, whatever it was, he was certainly a contributor of that tension. And I think a willing contributor to it. I think Michael Malone approached that as like, game on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, so whoever you lay the blame, he definitely saw that and was like, I'll play that game.
Yeah. It was a battle. It was a civil war. They both had their heels dug in. And if you think he should or shouldn't have, if Michael Malone would have been willing to go off, his mark a little bit, if he would have been willing to concede a little bit to Calvin Booth, he probably would still have a job right now, or he might still have a job right now. I'm not sure. But when you have somebody like Michael Malone, and something that makes him such a great coach is he is so principled and he is so structured. And he does have a very set definition of how I should coach and how we should play. That can be his biggest fault as well. He can't really, adapt. He can't really adjust that much. And that might have been the end, what it was in the end.
Mike runs hot. Or Michael, I should say. I don't want to disrespect him.
Can we
just 'cause
call
he's
him
gone.
Mike now?
No, I don't think so. He wants Michael. I'll call him Michael. Michael runs hot. And there's stories from even before he got here about nearly going to blows when he was an assistant with the Cleveland Cavaliers, almost getting in a fight with somebody else on staff. He was that ready. Like, let's go outside. They have to talk him off it.
Shout out Northeast.
Yeah, he is. That's his personality, and it's like, hey, he knows that. He embraces it. He talks about it.
Yeah.
But that energy, the guy that is always ready to go out in the alley and say, hey, let's settle this like men. If you're winning, it's like, hey, we need that. But when there are moments of tension or what have you, it's like, okay, this guy's trying to go out in the alley every day right now.
That's the coaches tripping aspect, I think, of that presser he was talking about. No, I think this is the part where I think anyone can put themselves like in the shoes of the folks involved, right? This isn't about competing in an NBA game. This is about having bosses. This is about bringing a certain attitude to work. And I think everyone understands what a grading dynamic is when they see one internally and they're involved. And I do think that is a bit of what happened here for sure. By the way, I think he should be allowed to coach his players hard. I think that's like a culture issue in the NBA in general. But once they stop responding, what he deserves, what's right, what's ideal, it's all out the window, right? And it's about what you do going forward. And from that perspective, I very much understand the decision.
And this team also had such little joy this year.
Yep.
Yes.
Throughout the entire season.
Last year, too.
And last year, too. And I feel like, particularly this year, Michael Malone had such little joy, too.
No kidding.
He never really
This is to your
seemed...
point. He might have been okay with
Yeah.
the sun setting.
He just never really seemed that happy this season. And yeah, it was a tumultuous season. There were a lot of ups and downs. They had the 9-game winning streak. That was really the only real high of the season.
Right.
From the beginning when they started 0-2 with 2 just terrible losses. That kind of set the tone, but there was no joy from the players. Michael Malone looked like he wasn't enjoying coaching this team for a lot of this season. And when you have those two things colliding, that's just kind of the end.
I think Michael Malone was a great coach when they were the hunter, but when they became
God.
okay, sorry.
The funny thing too is, as
That was good.
I think there was a lot of room to from a fan perspective to care about how and when he was sent off. Michael Malone also is about to enter very lucky territory as a head coach, by the way, which is the Frank Vogel, Mike Budenholzer. Not only is he going to get hired, he might get a raise wherever he goes next.
true.
Right?
It's true.
And if he plays his cards right, he might find another good team. So
How about this prediction? He just might be in media.
Oh,
Sometimes he had 10 years here. He won a championship. He's got a tattoo. Is he going to just keep putting tattoos all over his body?
Plus,
every team he coaches and wins with?
and he loved our questions so much.
And you know what I used to say to that, Doris? Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, exactly.
He could be on TV in a heartbeat, or maybe a friendship with Pop turns into a succession. Who knows?
I hope that when the dust settles on all of this, we look back on it and just have fond memories. Like, hey, everything came to an end. That was great. Malone's our guy. All hail Moach.
I think we will. I think in time we will.